Hey, here we are. My guest today is Rob John Anderson. He ran in the last election for a seat in the U.S. House of Representatives to represent Louisiana's 3rd Congressional District. He ran as a Democrat against the incumbent Republican. That bid was unsuccessful, but it was more than an uphill battle, to say the least, as Louisiana's 3rd District is one of the most conservative in the country. By one metric I saw, it ranked it as 36th. That's out of the 435 congressional districts. We'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But Rob certainly has his own loyal constituency. Many of his 135,000 followers on Twitter affectionately refer to themselves as the Rob Mob. You can find out more about him and listen to his podcast, even buy some merch on robanderson.live. I'll put that in the notes. Let me introduce Rob this way, though. I would vote for Rob Anderson. Now, this is generally not a political program, though I've gone there a bit more recently. But let me tell you why. He's real, period. And I've done my homework on this. I've said on this program a while back that I vote for individuals who are real men and women that put country before party. And I gave examples on both sides of the aisle, from the late John McCain and John Kasich on the Republican side to as far left as Bernie Sanders. And the reason why is because those guys have been consistent in their message and in their convictions from the day they got involved in politics. Do I agree with all of their policies? Of course not. That's an impossibility when you're talking Bernie Sanders and John McCain, right? But I see voting as a chess match. You're not getting in bed with a person or a party just because you vote for them. You're not. It's going to be impossible to agree with every policy, right? Um, and I'm certainly not going to get into bed with a particular political party that may have a hidden agenda. I vote for a genuine person, assuming they're not backing some crazy shit like QAnon. But I will I vote for the person who votes for their convictions and not what party leadership tells them to do. I believe Rob Anderson is that kind of person. I've been watching for months. Rob Anderson's real, and the reason I would vote for him and ask him on the program. So, with that endorsement, welcome to the program, Rob Anderson.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for that incredibly gracious intro. And I think you captured it all. So this might be your shortest interview on record. Thank you very much. Good night. Yeah, that was it was beautifully said. So I mean, I'm sure you do research on all the people you interview, but that leads me to believe that you've actually been paying attention for quite a while. It wasn't the canned response. And yes, I was running, and I ran twice, by the way. I ran in
Oh,
2018 as a literal nobody, and then joined the Democratic Party that summer. As a matter of fact, I started as an independent. I'd been registered independent for 31 years. So politically, you and I agree. I always vote for the candidate.
yeah. You do see Louisiana as a realistic opportunity for left-leaning uh, candidates.
Absolutely. And I'll answer it by partially correcting. I see it as an opportunity for a political party that focuses on the working class. Yes.
Mm.
Now, the Democrats used to be known for their pro union stance, their working class stance. Biden tried to bring some of that back, I think.
Yeah.
Kind of the blue collar, and that's where I come in. That's how I decided to run. It's like this is the regular working people, and Louisiana has a lot of them. It's not
Mm.
all oil. Oil isn't even the biggest industry in our state. It's just the one that happens to have paid off the most politicians. Healthcare is a huge industry down here, so you'd think they'd want
Right.
universal healthcare because it would increase employment. Not to mention everybody would have healthcare, but the oil
It,
companies
it
are the ones
it's
that.
a. I don't mean to cut you off, but it just it baffles me how people, some people will vote against their own interests. Like
Oh,
they will be poor and not being able to afford, private health care, and they'll vote Republican. I guess on an issue based on, like, because they're pro life or something. So they'll vote the Republican ticket, even though economically they're voting against their own self interest. It's crazy.
yeah. And the reason for that being people don't vote based on issues. My issues are infrastructure is always my biggest one because infrastructure doesn't just mean roads. It means literally investing back into ourselves. It means modernizing Wi-Fi so that during a pandemic, when kids can't go to school, these rural poor kids can still go to school virtually.
Yeah.
But that's infrastructure. And if you don't have that and you don't have a car and you have to walk 5 miles to grocery stores to get anything, which some of my neighbors up where we actually live in DeQuincy, that's what they have to do, or bum a ride from a friend. That kind of
Mm.
poverty level is not addressed by the tax cut they passed in 2018. The Republicans got control of the House. They passed a tax cut. Well, that's great, and maybe their employers got a nice break, but those people themselves still don't have a car, still don't have
Mm.
to get a way to get to work. We don't have the infrastructure because we don't have mass transit.
You
Our mass transit is minimal in the United
you are
States.
you are preaching to the choir. I mean, I grew up in Alabama. I
Yeah,
also
there you go.
yeah, and but I now live in Japan, and it's even in the rural part of Japan where I live now. I used to live in Tokyo, but I now live out in the Alabama of Japan. I live out in the southwest Louisiana of Japan. I live in Yamaguchi, but even out here, there's an infrastructure that's in place. I can take a bus to the train station. I can take the local train to get on the Shinkansen, and I can be in Tokyo in a couple of hours, honestly,
Yeah,
and
from your front
without
door.
yep, without even driving a car,
Right.
and
And much of Europe is the same way.
right.
I
And I
had the
realized that
similar
too,
experience.
America's spread out, and I realize, it's not as easy to just lay down Shinkansen tracks, bullet train tracks, from Birmingham to New Orleans and Atlanta, and connect everything. It's expensive project, but it's worth doing. It's worth it to me.
Ultimately, it's an investment in ourselves.
Right.
It is true that there should be a minimum standard of infrastructure around the country. Where
Mm.
we live is a third world country.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and
And the best parts of the United States, sure, it's first world. They've got state of the art, this and that. You get down to the rural areas, like you're saying, Alabama, Louisiana, parts of Mississippi, parts of Central Florida. I've been there too. Texas, a lot of it. They are lagging 50 years behind.
yeah, and I, when I go back, excuse me, when I go back and talk to family and friends, and I think that they think I am exaggerating or it's hyperbole to say that parts of Alabama are akin to a third world country. It's not an exaggeration. I have been to third world countries. I've been to. I'm not going to sit here and go off on the whole list of all the places I've been. I've been to rural Indonesia, and you know honestly, rural Alabama is not that much further ahead than places like I just described, and it's shocking, And I feel like it's also unnecessary. There's enough wealth in the United States that it's a shame. It's
And as I was,
improving.
yeah, now that you got that first button pushed, infrastructure, and then of course, to me, healthcare is just human infrastructure. It's again investing in your people. Everybody talks about tax increases or ways to pay for it, and the root of it is we need to realize that we pay for healthcare one way or the other. The term democratic socialism needs to be taken back. It's like we like the Norwegian model. I don't care what you call it, but
I
invest in
agree.
your people. Invest that everybody has health care. Come on. If
I
you
agree.
invest in people and the quality of life goes up, happy workers are more productive. There's studies that show this. It doesn't make any sense to me.
I totally agree. And in fact, when I have conversations like this with very conservative people, who I mean, some of whom I respect and value their opinion, but when we start talking democratic socialism, they like to bring up Venezuela or some examples like this of failed,
The failed
um,
model. Sure.
right, and
They're
then
not
so
going
of course, and and they cite that as if, well, that's the inevitable result, and then I immediately counter, I'm sorry, what about Sweden, Norway, Finland, Denmark? What about where I live in Japan? I mean, it's not technically a democratic socialist country. It might as well be labeled so. I have health care, everyone does.
Sure. Right.
All the things you described before about infrastructure here is a completely successful model, but
Yes. What I would answer to that question, to go ahead and interrupt you here,
sure.
uh, when they say, but what about Venezuela? They're pointing out examples of failed socialism. Of
Right.
course, right? You always poke at it, well, but what about, something that didn't work? And then you could point at, well, what would you call failed capitalism? The United States. The
It's
capitalist
going
model
there.
works great if you're in the top 1%. Believe me, their
And
lives,
I mean,
They're happy as, pigs wallowing in the barn or whatever
I got
country colloquialism you want. But for the rest of us, we're barely surviving. My parents had a house, a car, a truck, a boat, and all on my dad's single salary, and there were three kids. And that was a middle class life on one salary. When we
mhm.
were raising our kids, if we didn't have, my wife and I both didn't have a job at the same time, we were poor. We were straight up poverty level, barely getting by. Now, we did get our kids into and through college. We managed to do that, show them the grants and the loans. We aren't wealthy enough to pay for it. So we did our job as parents, but it wasn't easy. Never was easy. We had to work all along the way. There was no single income like the Eisenhower good old days that MAGA said, make America great again. Well, let's make unions great again because that's what you're talking about. When the middle class, you could be a laborer and be middle class. Now you're working class. If you break your leg, you're not working as a pipe fitter anymore. And then now what are you going to do? Now you're poor.
Right. Well, let's shift gears here. Let's go to January 6th, 2021. You know what happened? We all know what happened. And shortly after that, I had posted an article I saw on NPR that was a survey that said 40% of Republicans favored, or at least said that. Let me get it right. I don't want to misquote it, but said that it may be necessary for political violence to occur. And I was alarmed at that survey, and I posted it on Facebook, and some of my friends on the right were countered. Well, hey, the numbers are the same on the left. What about in the summer the Black Lives Matter protests and the looting that went on? My question to you is: violence in the name of politics ever necessary?
Well, for me to say no would be to disavow how the country was founded in the first place.
There you go.
Um, excuse me. So, living in the middle of Trump country as I do, I have heard firsthand all of the sides of this issue. Now, first and foremost, because I happen to be a citizen of the United States of America, of course, I am in favor of upholding its laws and protecting it from overthrow by those who are not duly elected. So, therefore, I do believe it was an attempt to assassinate the Vice President of the United States.
Right.
And they also sought out the Speaker of the House by name. So they're in the wrong, and I hope they're all punished accordingly. And I'm glad that the backlash was so uniform that people didn't see it as a contentious event, interpretations thereof. You either think it was even if you think it was mob violence gone wild, nevertheless, they still committed felonies against our own government.
Well, let's you bring up some good points. Let's talk about Donald Trump, and we are speaking now in the wake of CPAC, Conservative Political
Yep,
Action Conference, where there were still ridiculous claims of a fraudulent election,
yep.
despite there being zero evidence of that.
And
Yeah, in
60
fact,
lost court cases as evidence of that.
right. In fact, Rob, if the election was fixed, why didn't they fix it for you too? I mean, you were on the same ballot, right?
Right.
I mean, why didn't they fix the Senate, too? Why did we have to wait for the Georgia runoff? Why just fix the presidential if you're going to fix it?
Right.
And
It also
yeah,
goes along
that's
with those claims that Antifa was involved in the riot. It's like, yeah, we just won the election. Why would we be
right.
going to protest that? We won. We were at
Yeah.
home sipping margaritas, watching you idiots turn a protest into an insurrection. Yeah,
Yeah.
that
And
claim is laughable.
well, and apparently at CPAC there was this like golden idol of Trump that
Yeah,
attendees were worshiping.
it looked like
Lindsey
a movie cow from the Kevin
from
Smith
10,
movie.
10
Be the
oh
cow.
yeah, yeah. Lindsey Graham said after that, look, the nomination is his, talking about Trump. If he wants it in 2024, I think it actually splits the Republican Party like Ross Perot did to Papa Bush in '92. So here's my question for you, and then I have a follow up after. What do you see happening with the Republicans? I mean, do you see them all, putting their eggs back in the Trump basket and
Oh,
going that?
absolutely.
Yeah.
They have been so far, at least publicly. Now, privately behind the scenes, a lot of them say that they, didn't like Trump, but went along because on the face of it, they go where the power goes. And as long as Trump holds the power within the Republican fundraising, which he does, the people who rely on those Republican fundraising dollars are going to follow along with them. Never mind what they say in one-on-one interviews. Never mind what they say on C-SPAN or on MSNBC or on Fox or OAN. Doesn't matter what they say. It's what they do. If they don't vote against hardline Trump policies, which means opposing every Democratic bill, all that stuff, they are still following Trump
Mm.
because he's still pulling the purse strings, and that much is obvious. And I wish people would stop talking about like these elected officials have political ideologies. They don't. It- They're on one team or another. They really do
Yeah.
blow the wind. Now, as you said at the beginning, there are some that are slightly different. They're still you don't bite the hands that feed you, and that's in the Democratic Party too. You don't publicly condemn your fellow Democrats if you're an elected person. Now, would you talk to them behind the scenes? Yeah, of course. Say, hey, dude,
Mm.
why'd you vote against the minimum wage bill last night, Joe Manchin? Republicans are more unified. They are
Yeah. That's
absolutely in lockstep and have been. So they follow that money machine, which right
yeah.
now is still Donald Trump.
Well, what about the Democrats? What do you see that they now have control of the House? They got a one vote margin in the Senate with the vice president being the Kamala Harris being the tiebreaker, and they have the executive. Are we going to see a repeat of 92 to 94, where Newt Gingrich sweeps in with his contract with America in the midterms and just takes away that majority? They didn't do much, and the Republicans come in and take it back. Are they going to do anything in these 2 years that we got?
The jury's still out on that one. Um, yes, they are going to get things done. There is going to be some pivotal, game changing legislation that does get passed in these next 2 years. Is it going to be enough to prevent that kind of Tea Party backlash, the Newt Gingrich backlash? Historically, midterms are tough on the party that
Yep.
gets all the power. If you don't do the right moves, people are going to, there's always a backlash.
Yep.
So it's too soon to tell, is my answer, and that's not trying to escape out of it. My hope is that they can hang on, but the Senate is going to be tough. Well, the House, will we hold the House? Yeah, I don't see Republicans getting control of the House anytime soon. People are sick of their shit. They're really tired of it on the local level, and by local I mean congressional. The Senate is very capricious. It really is.
Right.
Uh, if the Democrats pass the right bills, they legalize fucking cannabis. Pardon the language. If they
Sorry.
legalize cannabis nationwide, that's a game changer.
Yep.
And yes, people see it as trivial, but my approach has always been that we need to legalize cannabis. Never mind the revenue. Never mind anything to reform the criminal justice system to address systemic racism. It's a
Mm.
root fix. It's right at the ground level. 3 times as many black men as white men get locked up in Louisiana for cannabis. That's a
Mm.
straightforward figure when there's a 3 to 1, 2 to 1 margin population the other way. We
Right.
have a large black population in the South. 33% of Louisiana is black. Compared to some other states, it's a high number. Yet it
Right.
is still a minority, right? There's 2 white men for every black man in Louisiana, and yet they're locked up 3 times as much. So it's actually like a 6 to 1 ratio.
Right.
Uh, and that gets fixed if you legalize cannabis. Then the local sheriff's departments have to do something else to earn their budgets.
Right.
Sorry, it's the 27 Louisiana parish sheriffs. That's who holds up legislation here in Louisiana on a state level. If you
Yep.
say, 10th Amendment, let states decide for themselves, which I agree with on most issues. However, federally, it should be descheduled as a Scheduled 1 narcotic, automatically decriminalized across the board with amnesty for existing offenses, and that should happen tomorrow. The
Yep.
Democrats want to win the midterms, run on weed. It's a popular issue. 70% of the country likes it. It's a
Yeah.
done. And the people who don't like it don't have any good arguments.
Well, the thing is,
Good
I
arguments is
don't well here's the thing. I've dabbled my fair share. I don't actually care for it. It actually doesn't, you know, do anything for me. I mean, it actually made me paranoid. But I also realized that alcohol is way more dangerous as a recreational activity than cannabis ever is. And I used to be a prosecutor in upstate New York, and I was an ADA, assistant district attorney up in St. Lawrence County, New York, near the Canadian border, and I would get these cases where um, some overzealous Barney Fives were just like jumping out of the bushes at the state park to nab some 18-year-old kid smoking a joint.
Yeah.
And that file would get on my, yeah. And that file, I mean, you're talking this kid could lose his financial aid and all this stuff. That file would wind up on my desk. The police, I was an ADA, so I'm supposed to work with the police, and I did. But I was honest with them, like, if you're putting victimless crimes, quote crimes, on my desk, some kid smoking a joint in the park, I'm telling you, I'm gonna find a way to let that kid out of it and and let him go. And I did. Any kind of victimless crime, I was the ADA you wanted to get. Now, if
Yeah.
it's a victim based crime, somebody beats up his wife, then no, I'm throwing the book at you. You're going to jail. Uh, but some. But that's the thing that goes back to what you're saying. You're going to put in jail a kid smoking a joint in the park with a guy that beat the shit out of his wife. That they're having the same punishment. That's insane. The kid didn't really do anything wrong, and for them to get the same punishment it makes no sense.
Yeah, absolutely. You nailed it. And that's funny that between you and I, we represent both parts of that equation. I was the 19-year-old kid who was busted standing on a beach smoking a joint. There's a lot of things can be threatened by, as you said, a victimless crime. And we can fix that across the country overnight just
We
by
should.
addressing that. So
Yeah.
politically, that's why that's a slam dunk. But then again, I thought the minimum wage was a slam dunk too.
Me too.
So,
That's
you
insane.
know,
Seven
that
dollars an hour. That's crazy. That's
I
crazy.
think the problem is that it's an over double jump. Is they failed to address it for so long that at this point it's obviously imperative. It's very much needed, yet nobody can agree on what the increment should be. And of course, the big push is to get it close to what would be a national median average of a living wage, $15 an hour, which might not fly in San Francisco, which already has a high minimum wage,
Right.
but it would be a lot, for example, right here in Lafayette, Louisiana. There's
Sure.
probably a lot of professional people who barely make $15 an hour here.
Right.
So when the minimum wage bill hits those kind of obstacles, we didn't have quite that supermajority you need to actually push through
Because
revolutionary
well,
legislation.
the filibuster, man. I mean, because you got
Right,
to have 60 to
right.
to push to a vote, and it's like we can't find 10 Republicans to stick their
Eight
neck out and say
Democrats would
like,
have been nice.
it's crazy, man. Well,
So that's where we are,
go
and I understand both sides. I understand why they voted it down. I do, but
ahead.
however, it's like all you're doing is extending that 12 years since we've addressed it, and we're not looking out for our people. We're not investing in ourselves.
Well, I'd vote for you, Rob.
Thank you.
um, well,
I'm not running for anything right now, by the way.
yeah. Well, I
I
saw that there was.
am not officially running for anything right now.
Oh, I was going to give you an opportunity to announce on this show, man. That I was going to get the exclusive. Yeah. Every episode, I do a final segment called 5 Minute Zen. And don't worry, you don't have to know anything or say anything about Zen or religion. I just generally talk about being in the present moment, mindful, grateful. Here's my question for you, Rob. How in these uber polarizing times do you stay calm? How do you maintain hope for democracy and humanity when a lot of the country are worshiping the golden idol of Donald Trump?
That's actually excellent and very fairly unique question for a podcast. So kudos for that one.
Thank you.
I have been asked it, but never in an interview before. How do I stay calm? Is I am never and have never been afraid to say I don't know to a question.
Good.
Some people don't want to admit a lack of knowledge. I know a lot of things. So if I don't know, I don't feel bad about it. I don't feel guilty about it. I was like, well, I don't know. Teach me. I will learn that. I know I have the capability to learn that. So that's always instilled a sort of sense of calm is that I'm never worried about appearing ignorant. If I'm ignorant, I'd like to correct it, but it's not a negative to me. It's like, oh, good, here's something else I don't know. It's one thing for me to be a repository of information. Great. lovely. That's good for you. But if you don't share it, then you're
Mm,
just like, you're a Google library. It doesn't matter if you don't apply that knowledge to like, hey, I know how we can actually beat Republicans down here.
mm.
Show up and vote.
Right.
Louisiana is a non-voting state. If you look at the numbers, everybody says, they switched here and back to Democrat after Clinton and blah, 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 and all these metrics the parties really focus on. And it's like, well, no, 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 look at, there's 50% of the population that's over voting and just doesn't vote ever.
Mm,
50%. You want to
yep.
change elections, get those people to vote. Don't try to convince the people who've already chosen sides.
Right,
They
right.
call their daddy was a Republican, and some woman took the time to find my number, call me, and told me that if her daddy was still alive, he'd come after me with a shotgun.
Yep.
I swear, this actually happened, and
Mm,
I was like, "Well,
yep.
thank you for calling, man." And
Right.
I still don't know how she got my phone number, but at any rate, so
Well, how do you
yeah,
stay calm? Yeah, when you got that, when you got death threats going on.
there was only two. Well, it is Louisiana. Everybody's armed. All my neighbors
Right.
are.
Right.
So how do I stay calm is knowing that there are answers to most of these questions. And it just requires us doing it and not getting frustrated when some of us fall behind and don't learn the lesson yet. And, I
Mhm.
understand you're going to learn. Come along. Stop voting for those idiots. All they want is to keep the oil and gas revenue flowing. That's all they care about. That's all they
That's
get
it.
paid to do. They're not maybe individually bad people, maybe, but nevertheless, they are on a payroll already. That's their job, is to make sure the oil and gas flows. So, of course, they're going to be against anything else. So, when you were talking about identity politics down here, that's why they tout Bible, guns, God, country. They stick with the church. And the Second Amendment's all identity. It's like we're on your side. We want the Constitution. We want, pro life. We want guns. They're evil because they want to change things. They're Democrats, they're communists, they're libtards. Fighting that messaging on the ground. That keeps me calm because I know people learn.
Yeah. All right. Well, there you go.
I hope that
Learn
was
something.
sufficient.
Oh, that's perfect. Learn something, people. And admit when you don't know. I think that was a good part of the answer as well. Yeah, no, that was very zen. Admit when you don't know, and then go learn. Awesome. Well, Rob Anderson, what do you have going on these days? Where can people find you? I mentioned robanderson.live.
The
What?
majority is through robanderson.live. We formed an LLC. We didn't get into politics and dirty money, which is good because that's my other pet cause. But in general, I won't talk bad about any nonprofits, but I don't get involved except with certain few that I know personally. We have a company that's just a regular old LLC that's a production company, and everything goes through there. Therefore, we are cleaner than the dogs behind, or whatever the southern expression you want to. So robanderson.live is the funnel for all that. That's our website. We have a shop. People can buy Rob Mob t-shirts or slogan t-shirts. All that goes to the
Mhm.
company. Then helps our big voter suppression. The Republicans got their asses kicked on mail-in balloting, so they don't like it when people show up
Right.
to vote. They'd rather they didn't vote. So that's
I mean,
what we're doing.
what would I do? I'm still a citizen of the United States, but I live in Japan. I didn't renounce my citizenship. I'm not a citizen of Japan. I'm a resident in Japan.
So you
So
get to vote.
I mail in my ballot. Right. Are they
Yeah.
going to take that away from me?
And
That's
that's what they're
crazy.
trying to do. They attacked the U.S. mail to try to throw this election, and we're still dealing with the repercussions of that. I hope DeJoy goes to prison.
Well, there you go. That that will wrap it up right there. Um,
Did I
Zen
make myself clear on that one? I thought I was pretty clear. I was pretty clear.
Crystal. That's there's my exclusive I was looking for.
There you go.
Um, if you like the show, Zen Sammich now has a Patreon page, patreon.com/Zen Sammich. My intention is to be listener supported and instead of running ads. Three different tiers. So for as little as a cup of coffee, $3, you can help out Zen Sammich. If you can't afford it, no worries. I want you to still enjoy the show. I'm going to still keep putting them out. If you do sign up between now and March 31st, there is a promotion. My wife and I, we make Japanese paper. It's washi. We make it by hand. I mean, we harvest the trees, we steam the bark, and I mean, from start to finish, we make it. We make stationery and all this stuff, and we make postcards. So I will send you wherever you are in the world. I will send you a handmade, personalized postcard from me in Japan to you if you sign up any tier level on Patreon between now and March 31st. So there you go.
I'm gonna get one just so that
There you
so
go.
that I can give my wife one of those handmade postcards.
Absolutely. Yeah, there. I got another page. It was worth it for that right there.
There you go.
Well, Rob Anderson, thank you so much for coming on, man. It's been a blast. You're awesome.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. I look forward to this coming out, and we'll shout it out. Just keep trying to make the world better.
There you
That's
go.
what I'm
That's
about. Just trying to make the world better.
what we try to do here too. Awesome.